She was standing in the middle of the forest in the dead of the night when she saw a frail-looking old woman who walked up to her and pointed to her stomach, saying that her child would bring her so much pain and suffering if she was not careful. Oriaku had never seen the old woman before and was extremely terrified. She immediately ran away, and the scary-looking woman ran after her as she woke up from the dream terrified. Once upon a time, there lived a happy couple who lived in a small village. Their names were Oriaku and Chiejina, and they had been married for so many years without a child. Despite not having children, Chiejina and his wife Oriaku spread happiness wherever they went. Their neighbors all loved them because of how nicely they treated everyone they came across. One day, Oriaku realized that she was pregnant, and Chiejina could not hold back his joy. He invited the entire village to his home to come marry with his wife and himself, and his wife Oriaku prepared some delicious meals with joy in her heart. Everyone gathered as they celebrated with the couple, who could not believe that they were finally becoming parents. Once the celebration was over, everyone returned to their respective homes, whilst Chiejina and his wife sat outside their huts, gazing at the night sky. They deliberated on the name to give their unborn child, and Chiejina suggested some male names to his wife. "I will name him Ahanna," he said as his face beamed with joy, and his wife Oriaku jokingly teased him, saying that the baby was definitely a girl because of how beautiful she looked despite being pregnant, and they both laughed as they walked back into their hut to sleep. That same night, Oriaku was awoken by a terrifying dream. She was standing in the middle of the forest in the dead of the night when she saw a frail-looking old woman who walked up to her and pointed to her stomach, saying that her child would bring her so much pain and suffering if she was not careful. Oriaku had never seen the old woman before and was extremely terrified. She immediately ran away, and the scary-looking woman ran after her as she woke up from the dream terrified. Oriaku believed that something terrible would happen to their baby, but Chiejina assured her that it was only a dream and that he would always be there to protect them from any harm. They both went back to sleep, and when morning came, Chiejina left the hut early to go hunting. Oriaku prepared his favorite meal, which was boiled plantain and palm oil, as she waited patiently for her husband to return. A few hours later, she heard a bang on her door and wondered who it could be. She saw two young men who informed her that her husband Chiejina was attacked by a ravenous beast in the forest. Oriaku, despite being pregnant, ran as fast as her legs could carry her to the forest, but before she got there, her husband's remains had already been buried. In their village, once a man is killed by a beast in the forest, his body is usually buried on the spot where he was killed. Oriaku wept profusely as she stared blankly at her husband's grave. "Chiejina, this was not what you promised me," she cried aloud as her voice shook in extreme pain. The villagers took Oriaku home as she continued to mourn the loss of her husband. Everything in their hut reminded her of Chiejina, and Oriaku found it difficult to accept the fact that her husband was no more. She walked into their room and saw her husband's favorite flute, which he loved to play on most evenings, and this brought Oriaku to tears as she picked up the flute and began to play her husband's favorite tune. Chiejina had taught Oriaku how to play his flute, and although Oriaku could not play the flute so well, she could play her husband's favorite tune perfectly. As Oriaku played the flute, she felt a weight lifted off her shoulders, and a strange sense of calm overshadowed her. Oriaku felt her husband's presence in the room, and this brought comfort to her that Chiejina was watching over her. As the weeks passed, Oriaku lived a life of solitude in her hut as she continued to mourn her late husband. She would prepare her husband's favorite meal and take it to his graveside to feed him. "My husband, I know you are hungry. Here is your favorite plantain and oil," Oriaku said as she dropped the food next to Chiejina's graveside as she wept uncontrollably. Oriaku did this for months till she gave birth to her son, who she named Ahanna, just as her late husband Chiejina had suggested. Despite her grief, Oriaku poured all her love and devotion into raising Ahanna, as she was determined to honor her husband's memory and fulfill her role as a mother. Ahanna grew into a very handsome and hardworking boy who was loved by everyone around. However, no one knew that the precious boy, who they all loved, struggled with something that they knew nothing about. Ahanna was extremely hot-tempered and would most time harm himself and his mother during his anger outburst. This only occurred when he was indoors, and Oriaku wondered why her son was so hot-tempered. Whenever Oriaku tried to calm her son down, Ahanna would flare up and beat her mercilessly, and Oriaku was so terrified of her son and wondered why he acted in such a way. Oriaku's heart was completely shattered by the inexplicable rage that consumed her beloved son Ahanna. In the stillness of the night, when the entire village was fast asleep and the only sound heard was the chirping of crickets, Oriaku would often hold her husband's flute close to her heart. It was a ritual, a silent conversation with Chiejina, seeking guidance for the burden she bore alone. As Ahanna grew older, so did the intensity of his temper. Their neighbors whispered amongst themselves as they were shocked that the young man, who could be as gentle as a lamb under the sun, was as fierce as a lion behind closed doors. One night, after an extremely violent outburst, Ahanna stormed out into the night. His mother Oriaku, bruised in body and soul, picked up the flute and played her husband's favorite tune. As the melodic sound filled the hut, Oriaku could feel a sense of calm that enveloped her entire being. She sat on her bed as she continued to blow into the flute as tears trickled down her eyes. Ahanna, who was aimlessly wandering in the forest, was suddenly overcome by a strange stillness. The anger, which had tormented him for long, receded as all he could hear was the sound of the flute that his mother was playing. Drawn by the music, Ahanna found his way back home. He stood at the door as he watched his mother play the flute so passionately. The truth dawned on him in that moment that the rage he felt was tied to his father's flute, to a past filled with so much pain and mystery. With trembling hands, Ahanna reached for the flute. Oriaku looked up, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. "Mother," Ahanna whispered, his voice breaking with emotion. "This flute, it is the source of my anger." Oriaku could not believe what she was hearing. "But how can it be?" she asked as she looked up at Ahanna. Ahanna, with newfound clarity, said, "I do not know, mother, but every time you play the flute, I feel the anger rising within me, an anger that does not belong to me. It is as if the flute holds a piece of father's soul, a piece that is tormented and restless." The revelation struck Oriaku like a bolt of lightning. The dream she had years ago about the old woman in the forest now made sense to her. The flute, her husband's favorite item before he died, was now a cursed artifact, linking Ahanna to a father he never knew. in a way that tormented both the living and the dead. With a heavy heart, Ahanna took the flute, and for the first time he played the flute and felt some sense of ease in his heart. As he played his father's flute, Oriaku heard a still voice that told her to bury the flute next to her husband's grave. So, without wasting any time, Oriaku took the flute from her son and headed straight for her husband's graveside. She buried the flute next to her husband's grave, and as she was about leaving, she saw the old woman who appeared to her in the dream many years ago. The old woman stood before her and revealed that her husband's soul had refused to rest because of the flute. Whenever Oriaku played the flute, she summoned her husband's restless spirit, which tried to possess his son Ahanna to enable him communicate with his wife Oriaku. But this did not work, as Ahanna became extremely angry and violent because of his father's spirit, which was still angry at the way he died. Ahanna only depicted his father's rage, and the old woman told Oriaku that the only way to stop this was to allow her husband's spirit to rest. She told Oriaku that the spiritual was way more complicated than the physical, and that Oriaku should allow her husband's spirit to rest, as then only will she enjoy the joys of having a son. She told her to stop mourning that which had been lost and focus on loving that which she had left. Immediately the old woman finished speaking, she disappeared, and Oriaku ran home terrified to meet her son, who sat in the corner crying as he pleaded with his mother for forgiveness. The anger, which had once clouded Ahanna's heart, was gone, replaced by an immense sorrow for all the pain he had caused his mother. Oriaku and Ahanna wept together as they healed from the pain. From that day on, Ahanna's life took a new turn. He became a source of peace to his mother, who began to heal from the years of pain she had endured. She transferred all the love she had for her husband to her son, who grew up to have his own beautiful family. The lesson to be learned from this story is that healing can take time, but most often than not, it takes letting go to begin the healing process. Learn not to dwell so much on the past, but be happy for what God has blessed you with currently. The story also teaches us that love can help us overcome hardship and pain. Therefore, we should learn to genuinely love one another and be resilient in the face of life's challenges. I hope you enjoyed the story.
Like, subscribe, and leave a comment. It helps us grow our channel. I'll see you in our next story. Bye.